Welcome to another go round of the Defender Roundtable, where we touch on all subjects of national, international, and even local interest. And today we're going to touch on a very important subject. And to do so, we're switching it up a little bit. Instead of our normally esteemed staff, we're going with a panel. We're going with a different format this week. And it's going to be an all-men panel as we discuss something that's very critical and very important to this election. And it seems to be the relationship or the disconnect, if you will, between some Black men and presidential candidate Kamala Harris. And we want to just have a discussion about what those issues are. I mean, and why some Black men have an issue with her, and how sometimes, I mean, it's just unfounded, is bad information, and we want to try to set the record straight today. And so to do so, we put together a great panel, starting with our own Aswad Walker. We have Donavin Bean, who's a financial advisor, Houston resident, a Morehouse man. And then finally, we have a very special guest today. And he's a Defender alum, Third Ward native, product of Yates, a proud graduate of Texas A&M. We're not going to mention this fraternity because we don't want to hear all the hooting and hollering today. So, but we're going to introduce.
Well, that's because I'm in a fraternity and y'all are youth groups.
See, here we go. We got our man Roland Martin. So, hey, let's just jump into it, guys. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the issues. I just saw a recent poll where it said from the NAACP, where they said only 66% of Black men over the age of 50 are supporting Kamala Harris. And that's compared to 79% of women in that same demographic. And I just want to talk to you guys, and let's have a discussion about, where do you feel the disconnect is?
Well, first thing,
okay. Go ahead, Roland.
First thing, when you look at that poll, you have to understand when the poll was taken. You also have to understand, go look at the crosstabs. The issue with that poll is a significant number of the folks in there were individuals who have not voted in the last two elections. So there's a difference between registered voters, likely voters, and non-voters. So when you examine a lot of these polls, that's what most folks don't do. They're not looking at the crosstabs. Christopher Toller, who is with the Black Voter Project, does a great job with this in looking at the polling data. And so in a lot of these polls that have been overstating Donald Trump's Black support, they are including people who do not vote. Yeah. So that's a huge piece there. If I'm going to listen to somebody, I'm not listening to somebody who doesn't vote. I'm listening to folks who actually do vote. So that's one. Okay. We also need to understand, you have to look at the data also in a much different way to understand what's going on. 2012, there was a 9-point gap between Black men and Black women in Obama-Romney. That number increased because there were Black men who said then that, hey, they felt Obama didn't do enough. Then you go to 2016, that gap widens. Then you go to 2020, that gap widens. So this has been happening for a decade. Democrats haven't been paying attention. I've been calling attention to this issue since 2012, saying, hey, if you don't address this, it's going to be a problem. You have a percentage of men who have a problem with Black girl magic. They say all we hear is Black women, Black women, Black women. The fact of the matter is Black men are the second largest voting bloc for Democrats. Black women are first. And so a lot of Black men, that rarely gets talked about. And so you hear Black men who say, yo, we're not getting credit for what we do. Then you have the other piece, which is critically important, that the further you get away from the civil rights movement, Black people less self-identify.
Yeah.
Black people 65 and older self-identify as Democrats. As you go down, they less self-identify. It matches in terms of the demos. And so the last point here, you have to micro-target Black people now. This is where white Democratic strategists, and the reason I'm saying that because they run campaigns, have a problem with. because the black voter in 2024 is not the black voter in 2004, it's not the black voter in 1994. What I mean by micro target, you now have to say, I have to now target a black male college educated voter differently than I do a black male who is a high school graduate or a dropout. I got a micro target. So I'll give you an example. I was in Georgia for Warnock in 2022. I was interviewing a black woman who owned a cafe, was in Jonesboro or Statesboro, one of the, not Atlanta. She says, listen, I understand reproductive rights. I'm a woman, but I'm not trying to have kids. She said, but I'm listening to Walker and Warnock when it comes to corporate taxes because I own this restaurant. So the traditional way to reach black people is have one message, broad, blanket. You reach them, September, October, you go through black churches. No, you now have to target black people totally different, and they still are struggling with that because they're using an old model to reach black folks.
Yeah. And that's scary. But at the same time, Roland, I mean, and that's why maybe you can touch on this for us. I mean, there still seems to be an issue with some black men who just can't get behind Kamala Harris for whatever reason. Some of it has to do maybe with her track record or what they believe her track record was when she was a prosecutor and attorney general in California. And what have you heard, Aswad? I mean, in terms of why some black men have issues with her.
And I love the way you phrase that question. What have I heard? Because I'm talking about what I'm hearing on cable news and other places, because the black men that I have spoken with personally in barbershops and all in churches and all the other places I go, the folk that I have interviewed, I'm not finding all these brothers who are voting for Trump, who are not voting for Kamala. But from what I have heard, one of the issues I've heard is she doesn't have a black agenda. What has she done, and her and Biden in extension, what have they done for black people? Well, if you really get into the weeds, they've actually done a lot. The whole Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, 16 billion funding for HBCUs, 2.8 billion, in Pell Grants, 2 billion for black farmers. That fight has been going on forever. 2 billion to clean up pollution in black communities, doubled the amount of black businesses, brought the lowest black unemployment rates and lowest black poverty rate in history, expanded the child tax credit, which cuts black child poverty in half. And I could go on and on. We all have elders, my father's 85 years old. They capped the cost of insulin at $35. And that's critically important for black folk because, we are disproportionately affected by diabetes and other things like that. Signed up 5 million more folk for Obamacare, canceled $168.5 billion in student loan debt. And I could go on and on and on about things that she has been a part of that have directly impacted black folk in a positive way. And then on the flip side of that, you look at Trump's black agenda. Since Richard Nixon 50 years ago appointed no black judges to U.S. Court of Appeals, and the judges that Trump did appoint are the ones that are undercutting all these policies and laws that help black folk. And I hadn't even started talking about the anti-democratic, anti-black agenda of Project 2025. But there's what has Trump done for black people is a question that I would love to ask these folk if I could ever find them face to face. I keep hearing about them on the news, but I have not run into them face to face.
Exactly. I mean, you see it on the news. Isaiah Washington, the actor, he's come out against her. And you hear people, black men, talk about they're still on the fence, and you wonder, like, what are you on the fence for? I mean, Trump seems to have zero plan for us or anything that's positive, I would say. Donovan, I'd like to talk to you. Just get your perspective as a black man and a non-journalist on this panel about what are your thoughts on Kamala and how to
Kamala. Support. It's Kamala.
Kamala.
So I feel really uninformed in terms of, having the statistics that Mr. Martin has brought out, that Mr. Aswad has brought out. I'm just a regular guy. I don't consider myself super political, but I do connect with Kamala on a few levels. I'm from California originally. I did go to an HBCU. So, being a Morehouse man, being so close to Spelman College, I could clearly see that Kamala resembles so many of my Spelman sisters in terms of her dynamic, right? For me, I connect with her on a lot of different levels, and just understanding her backstory really makes me feel comfortable, honestly, that she has the best interest of Black folk in mind, since we're talking about Black men, right? I, I really find it hard to believe that someone can really say, "Hey, you know what? I don't want her in charge of this country from a Black perspective." To me, like that's cutting off your nose to spite your face when you consider the opposition, right? So that's how I feel.
Thank you for that. Roland, I'd like to ask you, I mean, why should Black men in particular get behind Vice President Harris for this upcoming presidential race?
Well, let me go back to something that you said in terms of her record, things along those lines. We do have to recognize that there was massive amount of disinformation that was pushed out.
Yes.
That was pushed out in 2019 when she ran, and actually warned her, as well as her sister, who was her campaign manager, that listen, your record's going to get attacked. So you have to control the narrative now. That was in March of 19. They waited until July 2019 to put out their criminal justice plan. That was a huge mistake. You also look back, if you look at who did the Russian troll farms attack the most, it was her. It was her. So we have to recognize that you've been bombarded with that. So you got these Black men and other folks running around saying, "Oh, she put all these Black men in prison." Lie. And it's been refuted, but they believe the lie. So we have to recognize that that's also a part of this, what is being targeted to our community. We also got to realize, just listen, this is not a Black man issue. You look at white men, Latino men, same thing. And so there are men who don't believe a woman can be president. Look at the international firefighters. They've endorsed every Democratic candidate going back to Jimmy Carter. The only two years they did not endorse was 2016, 2024.
Wow.
Who happened to be the nominee in those 2 years? Two women. And we know firefighters also are more racist than a lot of cops are.
Right.
But I'm also, so my man Chris Toller sent me this, and it was a graphic. Presidential vote choice for Black men, 1972 to 2024. So 1972, 77% of Black men chose Democrats, 23% chose Republican. 76, 80, 19, 82, 14, 85, 12, 81, 15. So it was the highest around 15. All of a sudden, now remember I told you, 2012, 87, 11, 2016, 82, 13, 2020, 79, 19, 2020 Biden likely voters, 75, 20, 2024 Harris likely voters, 80, 18. So the reality is Black men are in more support of Vice President Kamala Harris than they were of Joe Biden. So historically, so basically, if you look at what 2008 with Obama, it goes to show you it was 95-5. So that was actually the highest number, the highest percent of Black men. But remember I talked about 2012. It was 95.5 in 2008. It went to 87.11 in 2012. So this is not just a Kamala Harris thing. We got to understand that Black men are more conservative than Black women. This is a reality. We got to deal with views of Black men when it comes to LGBTQ issues. We just got to put it out there. We got to understand that a lot of Black men are all about the bag, securing the bag, and so then that becomes an economic issue. So I think what needs to happen is that, one, anybody, when I hear these brothers and other people say, man, she ain't got no Black agenda, it's a lie. First of all, the Affordable Care Act played the biggest role in Black health. I mean, the percentage of Black people who were not covered by insurance was sky high before that. That ties to Black male health.
Yes.
Her focus on Black maternity, Black women who are dying in childbirth, that's a Black male issue. Why? Because these women are having Black boys. So, I mean, she's made that a cornerstone of her being vice president. When you talk about $17 billion going to HBCUs, you got to stop thinking, well, the schools. You got to remember that money also impacts the community that surrounds the HBCU as well. The businesses that surround the HBCU. When you had HBCU enrollment drop, guess what that impacts? Housing, apartments. It impacts restaurants, stores, grocery stores, everything around that particular campus as well. Then when you begin to talk about her plans for housing, when you begin to talk about the infrastructure, the infrastructure bill that was also passed, some $600 billion going into infrastructure, that's also jobs. And so I would say this, and this is the position that we have to take. When we come across somebody and they say, man, I ain't feeling confident, we should go, okay, give me your 3 issues. Give me the 3 issues that you most care about. And then when they tell us, that's when we say, this is where she stands or what Biden Harris has done, and this is where Trump stands and what he did. So when a brother says, criminal justice reform, that's my issue, and they didn't pass the George Floyd Justice Act, our response has to be, Democrats passed it in the House. Yep. Republicans stopped it in the Senate. Yep. Then when the new one, man, she didn't say nothing about that brother who was executed in Missouri, Marcel. But then that's when you say his name was Marcel Williams, and then you say that was a state case, that wasn't a federal case. But then you say this here: are you aware that in 60 years prior to Trump, there were 3 federal executions? Under Obama, Biden, it was 0. But are you aware that Trump executed 13, including some brothers, in 6 months? I guarantee you they're gonna be like, I ain't know that. Then you say, are you aware that under Trump, there was only 1 investigation of a police department for abuse in 4 years, and that was a small police department in Louisiana? Are you aware that there have been 12 under Biden Harris? So, bro, if you say criminal justice reform, here's the record. So that's how I think we have to approach this, because frankly, a lot of these cats out here talking have no idea what they're talking about. They're just repeating what they heard on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, and they just throwing stuff out. And so we got to resist to say, damn, you dumb. We got to resist to say, bro, what's wrong with you? And say, no. Give me your 3 issues. Because they might bring up something the president don't even control. And so that's how we have to approach this. And there's still time. Listen, you got 32, 31 days. Early voting starts in Texas, October 21st. The deadline of registers coming up. And so our attitude right now has to be, how do we get as many people registered? But once the deadline passes registration, then the focus is also on turnout.
For sure. Hey, man, that's a perfect stopping point. I mean, Roland, this has been great, gentlemen. This has been a great discussion. We could continue to go on and on because there's still so many moving parts to this, but we're going to stop here. Once again, I want to say thank you to both Donovan and Roland for joining us in this important conversation. And let's keep it going. And by all means, let's get ready to vote and show out. Peace
All right,
out.
appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.